First off, thank you so much for attending this webinar. It's nice to see so many familiar faces. Many VanHack hiring partners, probably a few VanHackers as well, and others here too. So I'm hoping to add a lot of value. I know it's been a difficult period for everybody, and a lot of people have transitioned to remote work. So at VanHack, we've been working remotely for quite a while, and we thought we could add a little bit of a value, share our point of view about how to work remotely. So basically, I'll go into the content and present for about 10-15 minutes, maybe a little bit more. But really, I want to keep this interactive. I really don't like webinars or PowerPoint presentations or things like that when someone's just talking, and I don't want to be that guy. So if there's questions throughout, please ask. I'll try and answer them quickly. If it's something that I'm going to get to, I'll just say I'm going to get to the next slide. And then, of course, at the end, it'd be great to have just a conversation and have people ask questions. Best tips for interviewing, for hiring, interview tips. When hiring remotely, how to build trust with candidates, for sure. Yeah, that's a big one, building trust. That's a good one, Joe. Thank you. Thanks, Tanis, as well for your question. Cool. So I'm going to ask, loving webinar remote work way more. yeah. Once you go remote, it's kind of hard to go back. How to help them get set up in the country. Thanks, Eve. And is that Eve from Softdesk? Good to see you, Eve. I'm not sure if it's the same person with the last name, but hire candidates as remote while we wait for LMIA. Yeah, Elaine, that's definitely something we do. Feedback policy, we're going to get into that, Rosa. Remote interviewing, building trust for sure, Mavash. And good to see you, Mavash, long time, no talk. How to bring foreign workers to Canada, work from offices again. Yeah, Pierre, for sure, we'll talk about that. Oh, awesome, Eve, good to see you. And great news about Nicholas, and I'm sure Daniel will be joining you guys very soon. Okay, guys, let's get into it. I'm excited. I hope you guys are as well. It's nice to have some social interaction. Okay, cool. So very quickly, some of you may know me, some not. I'm Ilya, CEO, founder of VanHack. We've been remote since 2015. I'll go a little bit more into our story very quickly. Right now, we're about 32 employees across the world in 10 countries. We have people in Asia, Europe, South America, and North America. And I think, yeah, every continent except for Australia, people in Europe as well. So yeah, we have a big team. Well, not so big team, but well spread out. So I'll talk a little bit more about that soon. Yeah, my pleasure, Mavash. Happy to be here. Cool. How can we negotiate the work permit with companies? Okay, so it's cool. I think we have some candidates here as well. So this webinar was supposed to be, mainly for companies that are hiring developers or tech talent, but it looks like we have some candidates too. So maybe we can have some questions back and forth between, if any employers want to answer that question about how to negotiate work permits for Tadas, maybe he can give him some tips. There's a lot of companies that are actually offering work permits and sponsoring visas to Tadas, and actually that's what VanHack's all about. But yeah, anyway, cool. So about today, we'll talk about VanHack's story a little bit. Of course, the advantages of remote work, why work remotely, etc. And then we'll talk about kind of characteristics of what makes a good remote worker. And of course, what are some of the disadvantages or maybe even perceived disadvantages? And then some tools. I know a lot of people ask about what specific tools, and I'm going to try and give as tangible, practical tips as possible. So really diving into the nitty-gritty details to help you implement things. Payment is always a big question. And then tips for actual relocation after. I saw a few people asked about that. Then we're going to talk about the VanHack Virtual Hiring Fair very quickly, which is a remote recruiting fair we're going to be running, or a virtual hiring fair we're going to be running in a few days, a few weeks at the end of April. And of course, questions. Like I said, ask me questions anytime, but at the end, we'll definitely have some time for questions. Okay, so quickly about VanHack, we help companies hire developers who either want to work remotely or relocate. Most of the time it's been relocation, but now with the current situation, a lot of it has been remote. And a lot of our interviews that have been remote interviews from the start. So you could be a developer who's living in another country X, who wants to move to country Y, and the interview would happen all on Zoom or Skype or Google Hangouts and happen remotely. So we have a lot of experience in remote interviews. Really, the way we start off, actually, because I was the only full-time employee in the beginning, there was two other people on the team that were part-time, but one was studying and the other one was in another country. So we kind of started remote as a default in 2015. It was really the only way, like it wasn't possible any other way. So it was that kind of how it all started in terms of why we decided to work remotely. And then I moved to Chile, and then our CTO Thiago, who actually we hired from VanHack, he was a VanHacker. He was working in Vancouver, so it just all kind of happened that way. And it's been great. It's really been one of our advantages, I feel. It's been allowed us to grow the team much more quickly. I'll talk more about the advantages, but it's been really like one of our key strengths as a team. I couldn't imagine working any other way right now. Of course, different companies have different products and policies, etc. But it's been really, made us much more efficient and fast, and they will help us do so much that we helped us accomplish a lot more. Kurt, I see your question. What's been your experience with global skills strategy? Well, VanHack is the largest international tech recruiting company in Canada. We've done more global talent stream applications than anyone else in the world from all of our customers combined. So I can definitely talk a lot about that. We have a webinar that talks about it and goes more into detail. And this is really not the best time for me to answer all the details, but we have a lot of experience with it. And if you Google VanHack Global Talent Stream or just VanHack, immigration, there's a lot of content there. And maybe someone from our team can put a Slack in the chat about that. There is no age limit to relocate, Caesar. Yeah, I think you have to be over 18, and I don't think there's a cap. Okay, so why hire remotely? Why work remotely? And the biggest thing for me is access to talent. If you are hiring, or if you confined to a physical location, you can only hire people that are able to commute and be in that physical location, which basically puts the people you can hire to maybe like less than 1% of the world's population, and especially for specialized roles. When you're trying to hire someone who's a senior machine learning engineer, of course you can relocate them in, and we love relocation, but it's the same concept, I think, of like widening your scope to have a global mindset, and allowing people, no matter where they are, to either work for you remotely or relocate and work for you in-house. Quick kind of thing, what VanHack does is we actually have developers who relocate and then work remotely from their new country. So we have people who are working in Canada, but they're working remotely, which is kind of a hybrid that we found that works really well, because you have the benefit of having the person be able to move to the country they want to live in, and then you have the benefit of them having the day-to-day flexibility of working remotely. And it does, as in the next point, really help with motivation. That actually, I would say not all the time, and we can talk about that and the disadvantages, but sometimes, or I think overall, people, when you give them that autonomy and flexibility, they're much more motivated to get stuff done. And it's all about hiring the right people in the beginning. We'll talk about that. But I do find that if you don't have that commute, and you don't, how many of you guys have woken up and said, oh man, like another hour commute? I know when I used to work in an office, that would always be not the best way to start the morning, especially like on a Thursday or Monday morning. But now my commute is just walking from the bedroom to the den, so it's a little bit more fun. And then another advantage is you kind of have that 24/7 follow the sun model. And I think especially in software development, this is really good, because you can have people coding and pushing code to production all the time, 24/7. I was just on a virtual event yesterday where Ryan Hoover, the founder of Product Hunt, was talking, and he was talking about how his team is distributed and how they have ways that the backend developers don't have to necessarily rely on the front end developers. They can do their work independently using modern tools. I think GraphQL and others. I'm not too technical, but the point is that they have a model where you wake up, you can code all day, and then the next person goes, wakes up, and there's of course some overlap, but it's important that you just keep doing that and pushing out code. And same for VanHack with recruiting as well, where we have recruiters across the world. We have a saying internally, VanHack never sleeps. And it's kind of cool to have that like global reach as a small startup that we are. Diversity, of course, is huge. I think in VanHack we have more women than men, or very, very close. So gender diversity is great for us. Cultural diversity for me is kind of the best part of it, because we have so many different mindsets and people from across the world, and we talk about different foods that we have, and just kind of fun things that happen. And then one cool thing for me, like I'm really into politics. So when the Venezuelan coup was happening last year, I don't know if you guys remember, there was, or I think there still is, like two prime minister or presidents, I forget exactly, I think it's presidents, two presidents of Venezuela, right? And we have two people or three people from our team from Venezuela, and they were telling us what it's like in Caracas, like as a live report. So it was kind of cool to get that perspective from someone who's actually there on your team, and I think that had a lot of value. Things like that I find cool, but I mean, everyone has their own different benefit in that sense. And I also think, like, from a coding point of view, or if you want to build a product, and these days you have to have you have to be focused on a global audience, right? Like if you're building some kind of software product, you're going to want to distribute it, especially if it's a B2C product. You want to get as many consumers as possible, right? And having people from different parts of the world helping with things like even translation or just cultural marketing differences. I can talk about some success cases where we had someone hired a developer from a different culture, and then that person helped them launch their product in that market. So things like that is really cool, are really cool. Okay, I'm talking a lot, guys. By the way, it's, again, for some people who just joined, hi, thank you for coming. I hope this adds value. And if you have any questions, please ask in the chat. Are you guys okay? Just do a check-in, thumbs up. Content is still relevant and not boring. I always want to make sure that we're not where we are adding value. Okay, let's move. We got a lot to go through. I think just the last ones I'll kind of summarize and then move to the next slide. It really, thanks Marina, I appreciate that. I think there's a delay in the chat, but yeah, thanks even tomorrow as well. Alyssa also, cool. Thanks Gillian, Abigail, Vahid, is that Vahid from Iran? Take your breath, yeah, thanks to us. Oh man, okay, so when you hire from abroad, and there is that, and we'll get into this soon, but this kind of, I guess, benefit that you can hire someone without having that huge risk. So what does that model, what does that mean? Like, you can have a trial period when you're hiring from abroad or hiring remotely, I think in general, really, and there is always that also in person too. But I think in this case, like, with VanHack, a lot of times people hire, and then there's the relocation or the visa part of things. And what we a lot of time recommend is, if you're not really ready and you're not 100% sure on the candidates, you can hire them and start remotely. Yeah, oh, sorry, Vahid, good to see you here. When you get hired, I can't wait to share a success story about what you happened in the VanHackathon, Vahid. So it's really good to see you here. And looking forward to doing that video with you, because I know how hard you worked for that coding project. Anyways, so you don't have to necessarily have the person relocate right away, and having them work remotely gives you this flexibility where they can get to know you, you can get to know them, and they don't have to, there's not that large movement and change in the person's life. So I'm talking specifically on that, like, kind of VanHack relocation point of view. And also, if the person's in the same city, I think it's also, I don't know, nowadays everyone's working remotely, and even if you're in the same city, so it's kind of different. But if you are thinking about hiring someone from abroad and relocating them, but you're not quite sure, you can de-risk the hire by having them do a remote trial or remote work for 2 or 3 months. And we found a lot of our customers have done that. For example, Eventbrite did that here in Vancouver, where they hired a front-end developer she spent 6 months working remotely for them. They even had her join and come in the summer because she was coming from South America, so they were a little bit worried about the weather, things like that. And that got, really gave them solidified that this is a great developer. She's a front-end developer. She was really good, and at the same time, she knew that they're a serious company, got to know them a little bit. And it was really cool because they told me that when they met in person, that it was almost like they knew each other, right? So it's funny how these days you meet more people online than you do in real life. And then when you meet in person, it's almost like, oh yeah, I know you, like I know your personality. So anyway, that's a big benefit of remote hiring. Okay, what are what are the characteristics? What do you want to look for when hiring people remotely? Who are the kind of people that are maybe thrive in this? And I think a lot of this is similar for people who are on site, but it's amplified in a remote situation since you can't see if they're physically, at the office, etc. So really, action is the most important thing, or one of the most important things. Is someone who doesn't just say they're going to do these things, but actually do it. They're not just sitting in their desk, but they're actually working, and you can actually see the results of this. Different roles, of course, it's difficult to know. Sometimes it may be as a developer, it's pretty easy to know. Like, you can see the code of what's the how many commits do they do, or what's the quality of the code, the peer reviews, etc. There's a lot of things you can do to determine whether this person is qualified. And maybe other roles is a little bit more difficult, but it's always good to have a KPI and clear measurements as to what you want to get out of the relationship, or the working partnership, the employment agreement. So having that very clear, and having check-ins, which we'll talk about actually in our next webinar about remote onboarding. We'll talk a lot more about that, how to make the best of the first 90 days of a remote employee. But it's really important to have that very clearly communicated and written down, and that person is able to know that, okay, I need to get this stuff done by this time. If not, there's going to be a problem or adjustment of some sort. But communication skills also are very, very, very important. So people who can write really well is incredibly important, since most of the communication will be written. Of course, there's calls and things like that. That's important too. But that's kind of the most important type of communication for me is written. Can you write well? Do you reply quickly? Are you able to just get your thoughts out in a succinct manner? And most important thing is about building trust over time, right? So how can you show that you're actually working, you're actually engaged, you're taking things seriously? And I find actually the first kind of 30, 90 days is not really the biggest challenge for me. For me, I found the biggest challenge is kind of like from day 90 to day 180 or later on, when people kind of get comfortable in their position, and you feel like, okay, or at least they feel like they've kind of gone through that first little bit, and then now they're in a position where, I don't know, I'm going to pick on salespeople because I'm kind of a salesperson by training, and I think a lot of times salespeople have at VanHack actually, we've hired some people, and all our salespeople are remotely, and we found that later on, like, we go through and check their activity, and they really weren't producing. So yeah, that kind of thing is tough, and I find that it's hard, right? Of course, you've already invested a long time in the person, but if you just constantly keep on track, that's kind of the most important thing. But I had asked, what are the steps to build trust? I think a lot of it is similar to building trust, in person, face to face. Working in an office is doing what you say you're going to do. If you're not able to do it, give a warning. Like, if you're going to be late for a meeting, say, hey, I'm going to be 10 minutes late for this meeting. Just a heads up. That's really, really, really big. Things like, what else? Yeah, I think just communication, like replying quickly is so underrated. If you're a candidate as well as a company, right? Because if you think about it as a company, or like if you're working for this company who's on the other side of the world, maybe you've never met them before, you see some good things about them on Glassdoor or online, but are they really that serious? Like, you never really know until you try. And so if you, as an HR professional or as a hiring manager or manager of a person, gets back to the candidate quickly, or the new hire quickly, is able to really have that clear communication. All of us in person, like, we're just on our phones or on our computers anyways, and how fast do we text back or call back, things like that. That's very similar, I would find, in person. And yeah, just doing what you say you're going to do, similar to in person, I feel is the best way to build trust. Okay, we're already 25 minutes in. We have a lot more content to go, and I share a lot of questions. So let's just speed things up quickly here. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the disadvantages, or perceived disadvantages. A lot of times people think that when you're hired remotely, the quality is going to be lower. I don't know. I kind of feel like this is a little bit of a unfair bias, or even like a subconscious bigotry, if that's okay to say, a little bit politically incorrect maybe. Just because a person is in another country doesn't mean that they're not as good quality. I've had many conversations with many companies, and I won't name names, of course, where they're like, "Oh yeah, developers from that country, they suck," or something like that. And I'm kind of like, and they feel like it's totally normal to say that. And I just look at them like, are you serious? You're being very racist right now. But I think that there's unfortunately these stereotypes that you have right from around the world. And a lot of times companies come to me and like, Ilya, where do all the best developers live? What country? It's like there's like magical land where there's the best developers. I don't know. That's pretty tough to say, right? There's great talent everywhere, and of course there's great people and bad people everywhere, just like there's great people and bad people in Canada, or whatever other country. I mean, I'm in Canada, that's why I said it. But yeah, that's yeah, quality I think is a perceived disadvantage. I think it's all about finding the right person and the right conditions for that person. So yeah, we've had people from all around the world, and we hire two people from the same country, two people from the same city. It's not like they're going to be the same, right? So I think that's something that people maybe have a little bit of a bias towards. Trust, I think that, yeah, definitely is a disadvantage. You don't get to see the person as often. You can jump to negative conclusions a lot faster, I feel, than if you weren't, maybe you don't give them the benefit of the doubt if they're remote. I found that even for myself, when the person's working remotely, you just kind of feel like, hey, they must be like watching Netflix or doing something like non-productive right now. Why aren't they replying to me? And I'll talk a little bit about how to change that. Yeah, Rosa, for sure. Yeah, Vancouver, definitely multicultural place. But maybe some places, you're right, are a little bit more closed-minded. But honestly, I've heard these comments from people in Vancouver as well, and all over. But yeah, it's just people are people, and I think we'd have to fight against this all the time. So yeah, cool. Language, cultural differences. This can be a perceived disadvantage. Of course, it can also be a disadvantage and a huge advantage depending on how you treat it. So time zones. Actually, VanHack just asked about that. That could definitely be a disadvantage. If you have someone who's working in a faraway time zone and you're not able to connect with them. I think it's just about having ground rules up front. So right now, we'll give a great example. One of our so our head of marketing, Aditya, who was on the webinar and helped me make these slides. Hey, Aditya. He actually got stuck in India right now. So he's in a different time zone. I think he's like 13 and a half hours ahead of me. And I think what we just had communication. He told me, listen, Ilya, I'm going to be working from this time to this time. So, so I'm going to be working from this time to this time. So you can expect me to be online until X hours. I think it's like 10:30 or 11 a.m. my time, which is not too late his time. And so we have that overlap. But then he's able to do like more maybe deep work or earlier on in his day when not too many people are online from the team. So you just have to be very, very, again, communicate about it and just make sure everyone knows like these are my working hours. And maybe because I'm in a different time zone, I'm going to work a little bit different hours. So I'm going to work a little bit later, and then I'm going to start, in the afternoon instead of starting in the morning, kind of thing. And just have that conversation up front. And then, of course, the most important thing is just following through. Okay, and then let's just keep moving here to different. So quality of work. So how do you ensure that actually people are able to do the things and on board? This is a little bit of a preview of what we're going to talk about next week. But really, it's not really too different from in person. So having a buddy system and a mentor, which I think a lot of people do, and when onboarding new employees in person, documentation is huge. I think that's probably the biggest difference is having clear documentation. We use a software called Confluence. There's a lot of other good ones. I think Notion is growing a lot. There's many different ones, but Confluence is the one we found. It's part of the Atlassian stack. So it's with Jira, etc. So that's been really good, and I can maybe even show you guys what ours look like. If anyone wants, I can give a little overview, but it's pretty good. And before we just started with a Google Docs, like just a Google Doc with it was like 80 pages at one point, but you can just Control F and find things, and that was good enough. GitLab, I'll talk about them soon, but GitLab has an amazing handbook and really good documentation. It's open source, so if you want to see a kind of best practice for a virtual team guidebook, I think they're like over $1 billion company, and I mean, you guys probably know what GitLab is if you're in tech. So it's, yeah, they have a very good open like documentation. Anyone can read it. Definitely be more okay with the kind of people making mistakes. There probably will be a little bit more of a stumble in the beginning. So just be a little more tolerant to that. And definitely micromanagement, something that you want to resist. It can be very tempting to kind of just be like, hey, I want this thing to be done exactly this way, especially when someone's starting off. But that can put people into feeling that, hey, they don't trust me, they don't think, they don't value my work, and lead to people being demotivated. And then definitely check-ins are very, very important. So have a check-in every week. And then I'll also talk about a software that we use, 15.5, to do kind of a standardized check-in at the end of every week. It also helps us with our OKRs too. Okay, we are officially halfway through the webinar. Another check-in here. How are you guys doing? Is this okay so far? We do have a few more slides, and then I'll get into the questions. Looking forward to those. I see Kurt asked, any AI screening tool available? Kurt, do you mean screening for personality or for code? I've heard good things about Plum as a company that hired a few VanHackers in Kitchener-Waterloo. So Plum for personality tests. I think there's another one. There's many actually, but yeah, I'm not sure exactly what you mean, Kurt. Okay, I already kind of touched on this, I think, already, but I'll quickly go through it. So building trust, Vahid asked about that. The one thing I really like about here is getting time to know each other virtually. So we're actually going to host a virtual happy hour. This is something we should do more actually as a company. I've scheduled one now monthly, but before we only did one previously last year, and I think we should do them more. One thing that we also have yoga that we did this morning as a team virtually. So yeah, that's something that you know, it spices things up a little bit, adds a little bit of fun, gets people to get to know each other outside of work. So that kind of stuff, like doesn't have to be yoga, it doesn't have to be a happy hour, it can be whatever your company culture is, but having some sort of social activity virtually, I think is nice, especially now you kind of are forced to do it virtually. But if you are working in a remote team, then that's important. Yeah, so we talked about expectations, we talked about, yeah, and then yeah, build a culture. Trust is definitely top down, so it has to start from the top. It has to start from your founder, your CEO, your management team. If they're leading by example, and maybe, you know, saying publicly on a team call, hey, it's okay to go to the dentist and take a couple hours, and you know, come back and finish your work. It's really one of the nice things about remote work, is that because you can't really see people, as long as you clearly communicate where you're going to be and what you're doing. And that's actually something that people ask a lot, is how do I track hours? And like a lot of times my team comes to me like, hey, like I worked X amount of hours over, and like I don't know, I kind of say it all kind of comes out in the wash, like unless you really are putting like an extra, like working on the weekend or for some kind of event or something. I would just tell people like, listen, just be an adult about it. Don't need to track every hour, half hour extra that you work or that you took off, etc. Just, you know, do your work and get things done, and the results will speak for themselves. That's definitely something that can be abused, so you got to keep an eye out for it. But so far, it's been okay for us, and I think as long as you know, it all starts with hiring the right people in the beginning, and then from there, that kind of eliminates a lot of issues going forward. One of my favorite rituals at VanHack, and one thing I really love, is waking up and seeing these messages. This is people on our team saying good morning. So it's a nice thing that I don't know how this started. Actually, I don't remember when exactly this started or who started it, but for as long as I can remember, we've been saying good morning on our team channel, just to kind of check in and give motivation to each other. And then you kind of see the Slack emojis. We use Slack, as you can see here. Does everyone here use Slack, or do you guys use other tools like Microsoft Teams? Or I'm guessing everyone has some kind of internal team chat. I remember back when I had my first job, we used Microsoft Lync. Oh yeah. But yes, I'm guessing Slack is probably the default these days. So one other thing, good thing about Slack is you can set statuses. So you can put a status saying, hey, like I'm in a meeting, or I'm at lunch, or I'm commuting, or something else that allows people to know where you are. Like right now I put in my Slack that I'm in a meeting. So people know that I won't reply right away. And that's kind of another thing about communication. So you want to make sure that everyone knows what's going on, rather than like wondering, hey, why did this person take half an hour to reply to my message? Are they actually online, or do they just have their phone open or computer open? So there's like a little green icon, but they're not actually working. So if you can just put like, doing X, Y, Z tasks, or like super focused right now, heads down, those kind of things make a huge difference, I find. So it's something that I catch myself not doing because I forget. And I think it takes a little bit of time to get into it. But yeah, if you can just do that little thing, I think it'll make a big difference for you and your team. And yeah, try saying good morning to your team virtually if you guys don't do that already. I'm curious what rituals you guys might have that I didn't say here. Okay, so cultural differences, you're definitely going to have that if you have a multicultural team. I mean, you could have a remote team that's all from the same country or region, I guess. But I think like things such as, being on time to meetings. Some cultures, it's okay to be 5-10 minutes late. Other cultures, totally not. Being direct versus indirect in your feedback, especially if you have a manager who's very direct and they might offend a subordinate who is not really in that culture. Things like this. So it just, I think, just being aware of those things, like any company, really, if you're working in person with a multicultural team. One thing that is different, I think, is if you have employees in other countries, is holidays. So that's something that me as a manager have definitely had frustration over, because you have some employees in a country where they have like a 4-day weekend, and you're just like, what is going on? Half my team is off for 4 days. This is not cool. And let's say your customers are in a country where there is no weekend, or there's no holiday. So that can be a little bit tricky sometimes. So just keep those, just make sure everyone knows that. One good way to do it is just have everyone share their Google Calendar, or share their holidays, or our amazing HR manager, Mayara, she actually sends out holidays for all the different countries to everyone. So you would know that X person is offline because there's a holiday in their country. So like when there's Diwali happening in India, we know that the people who are working our team in India are probably not going to be online, or not going to be online because they have the holiday there. So yeah, what is our remote stack? So we use these tools here. I already touched on a lot of them. One that I've been really liking is Asana. It's really great for project management, task management, getting everyone on the same page. You can easily like add people and add notes to different tasks and kind of keep up to date on different things. I really like that one. Of course, like Slack, Zoom, it's almost kind of fundamental these days. And then 15.5, I really like 15.5 as a tool. There's also 7Geese. They're actually from Vancouver, but we start with 15.5 and all our data is there, so it's hard to switch. Lock-in effect on SaaS service, I guess. But that's really nice too. And what it does is allows you as a team member to do like take 10-15 minutes, write down your kind of weekly report on a Friday, and then your manager can review it in about 5 minutes. That's where the name 15.5 comes from. But it also, you give a task out of 1 to 5, and then also you can write high fives. So you can kind of give people virtual high fives. And what I did last week actually is I connected the 15.5 high fives feature into our Slack channel. So I can probably show you guys here. So 15.5, I hope you guys can see this, or else I'm just talking and I can't see the chat right now. So you can see that Andy Bull gave Jose Luis, a high five, talking about great start on the team. He's smart and he's interested, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's cool. Everyone on the team can see this, and I think it really helps build morale. So yeah, just one quick thing. One cool tip that we had, and we were thinking about how we can help people who are maybe transitioning from interviewing in person to interviewing remotely, is start with your existing employees. So maybe do like a practice interview with people who you've already hired as a way just to kind of work out the kinks of things that might go wrong, and see what that's like. One thing I will say, and maybe challenge you guys, is that you have been interviewing remotely already. You just don't know it. I'm sure many people here who are in the HR space have done phone screens. Phone screens is a remote interview. Of course, it's not a full technical assessment, etc., but it is a remote interview, and I think it shows that interviewing can be done, hiring can be done fully remotely. I think there's so many companies in this space who have hired people remotely completely. Actually, I haven't met most of the people on our team in person. So yeah, it is totally possible. So things that you also want to be kind of aware of is nonverbal cues. So just things like people's clothes that they wear, the body language, little things like lighting. It makes a big difference. Good internet connection. Sometimes this could be a tough one because sometimes it's not their fault, but usually if the person, like nowadays there's good internet almost everywhere and the person should take it as time. Another thing with time zones, we of course, like you're interviewing someone on the other side of the world, it could be difficult with time zones, trying to be accommodating and flexible for that. But we've had many VanHackers do interviews at like 2, 3 a.m. And they've been very motivated and okay for it because they're really excited about the opportunity. So, oh, cool. Happy to help, Galen. Take care. Bye-bye. Yeah, and if anyone else needs to leave, I won't be offended. Just enjoy your days. We'll post the replay later on if you'd like to check it out. Cool. And then, yeah, a testing of the worst thing, I'm sure you've all been on this situation where you're about to connect on some kind of video conference tool, but the tool doesn't work. I had that last week when someone was using WebEx. I don't know why people still use WebEx, but anyway, the person who organized the event wasn't able to participate, so no one was able to get in, so we had to go and switch to Google Meet. So little things like that can be a problem if you you need to double check, like, can you actually get into the room? I think Zoom and Meet are the best, probably Zoom being the best tool out there these days for virtual connections. But yeah, time zones, just quickly on time zones, you can also mix up time zones very easily. So make sure that that's like very clear. And then as a candidate, for the candidates who are here, you should definitely be online like 10, 15 minutes before. And then as a company, try and be there a little bit early, send out the link to the candidate like right before the interview as well, so they know exactly where to meet, what hangout window. You guys can't believe how many times we've had a VanHacker be on one instance of the Zoom or Google Meet, and a company be on another one for some reason. They have the interview happening at the same time. So yeah, things like that can be problematic. So just make sure you watch out for those technical issues. Okay, coming down the home stretch, payment. So this is something that we get a lot of question on, payment, tax, etc. We are big fans of TransferWise at VanHack. I think you've probably all heard of it. It is really, really easy to use, very affordable, like very good exchange rate and almost no charge, and works very quickly. So I would use that as the #1 option. PayPal is also pretty good. Payoneer is good too. Payment Rails is another one I've heard recently that's pretty good too. But there's many different. World Remit, another one. There's so many. So that's important. How do you actually hire people? What kind of contract to go over? We just hire people as independent contractors, and that's been fine for us. We also have, if they have to worry about like any tax issues, we just tell the candidates, hey, listen, like this is, or the candidates, the people who are working remotely in other countries, is they need to follow the laws in their country, and we trust that they do. If they have any questions, they can always talk to our HR and they have all that kind of conversation. But most countries allow people to work remotely as independent contractors. And if you have any other questions about that, we can definitely talk about it. But yeah, just have the contractor send you an invoice using something like FreshBooks or even QuickBooks, or just like a Excel template of an invoice. It's really simple, and then pay them monthly that way. So yeah, and then payments at the end of the month. So that way that you don't pay the person and that they can just quit and take 1 month's salary at the end. If they do that, always want to trust but verify kind of thing. All right, some benchmarks. So these are kind of blogs or companies that I'm a fan of. So Zapier has a really good remote work blog, remote work guide. They think they wrote like a 15-part series. GitLab, I mentioned the handbook, but they're really, really good. And there's a lot of good interviews about remote work from GitLab. Buffer also has a great blog about it. Automatic is probably my favorite. Automatic is the company that is behind WordPress. And there's actually a podcast that I listen to called Distributed by Matt Mullenweg, who's their CEO, and who talks a lot about remote work and how that helps. One thing that they do and that we were planning to do this year is to have a team meetup. So a lot of remote teams get together and have like a 1 week in-person kind of team event. Unfortunately, we had to cancel ours because of the current situation, but it's something that I can't wait to do. And I think it really helps with morale, and it's just fun and nice to meet people you've been working with in person. And I think, yeah, you kind of can really bond, and I'm excited about that, but unfortunately it won't be possible for us for the next couple months, maybe at the end of this year, who knows. Okay, so talk a little bit about VanHack. So we can help you hire people remotely and then also help you relocate them to your cities. And we've done this almost 900 times now. I'm getting close to 1,000. So it's something that we are experts in, and what we are recommending now, like with the current situation, is you hire someone remotely and have them work remotely while the immigration paperwork is happening, and then afterwards relocate them and have them move to your city and work in person, whether that be in your office or maybe even remote or a flexible combination of the two. So yeah, this is definitely something that I recommend everyone to take advantage of. Everyone's going remote right now, and the sooner, well, I guess we all have kind of been thrust into this situation, but I think there's a big opportunity for everyone to learn. Maybe you don't have to do all those meetings. You can send a little bit more of messages on Slack, have a little bit more of a kind of asynchronous communication. And I think, really the best for me is the remote and relocation aspect, because you get someone on your team who's super excited to be, working for you, because you are able to help them move to another country that they're going to love living in. Their visa is going to be sponsored by you, so there's a little bit of that job security for both sides, and also they can have the flexibility of working remotely still. So for us, that's been really, really cool. And we encourage everyone to, if not necessarily have everyone working remote all the time, but give them that flexibility. It might surprise you. Cool. So next time, so that's it. That's all the content. Just very quickly, we're going to have another webinar all about onboarding. We're talking about exactly what to do after you've made the hire and how to help them become part of the team and really engaged and working with you. That'll be next week. And then last thing I'll say is that we are hosting a virtual recruiting fair tomorrow. I'm not sure if you're still here tomorrow, but tomorrow was with us in Colombia, where we had a recruiting fair in. Oh, awesome! I'm loving all these questions. I'm going to ask you. I'm going to reply to them soon. Just let me quickly finish up. So, what we do a lot of times in VanHack is we bring companies to different countries where there's a lot of developers for them to do in-person interviews. But what happened is one of the companies that was going to come with us to that event that we did in Medellin in March wasn't able to actually travel. So they decided to do the recruiting fair, the mission we call it, virtually. And they end up interviewing like 32 senior developers in a day. And now they have, I think, 7 or 8 final round interviews with those candidates. And hopefully they're going to make some hires soon and add those people to their teams, have those people work remotely. And then once borders open up again and people can travel, have the people relocate. We also have Evelyn from Softdesk, who just made a couple hires from that event as well. But the point is that we thought we would take that event and put it online. This way we can have developers from all around the world, not just developers who can be in Medellin on a specific time or date, have people from all around the world and have companies from around the world and have this recruiting fair happening. So if you're interested in interviewing 1 or 15, 20, 30 developers and have it happen kind of in a quickly blitz interviewing process, be much more efficient, just check out the link, which I'll share here, or just email us and we can help you out with that. So that's the link. And with that, I will share or answer questions. I'm just going to see if I can stop the presentation. Okay. Yeah, so questions. Let's get into it. Hey, Tamara, I'm glad you like the candidates. How long does relocation take? About 2 months. All right, I'm going to scroll down. Greg asked a really good question about hybrid teams, some remote, some local. Yeah, I think that's really a huge trend. So a lot of companies are going that way. I think just as long as you're not making the remote people feel like second-class citizens, then you'll be okay. If you have a culture where like everyone was working in the office and then all of a sudden you added on some remote folks and they're not really in sync, and I feel like especially if you're like on a dev team and you, for example, like you don't follow Scrum and you don't have like everything documented in your roadmap and in Jira, and you kind of have conversations about it in the office and then build the product, you're going to really make the developers who are not on site feel left out. And whatever, extrapolate that to whatever different department. So as long as there's a balance and kind of a flat and open communication between both sides, the remote and the local people, you can make it work. And I think it'll really help augment your team because you can, maybe have the benefits of having the in-person quick conversations and then also having people hybrid. And then I think it could be cool to like fly people from your team to your office for a couple weeks, maybe for them to start in the beginning so they can kind of get to know everybody and understand how things work. If you're able to do that, I would definitely do that for your team. But yeah, I think the hybrid team model, Greg, is definitely growing. And more and more companies are going remote or hybrid. So really great question. Okay, hope that answered it. Do you hire self-taught developers? Yeah, definitely a lot of companies hiring self-taught developers. Bye, Alyssa. Thank you. What platform do you use for the virtual recruiting fair? Well, we're just going to use probably Google Hangouts or Zoom for the interviews. Yeah, Oluke, that link is for employers, but if you want to join the event as a candidate, here's the link for candidates. Cool. Okay, did I miss any questions? Alini from Lowagan. Oh, awesome. Yeah, it's a great program. Tadas, that was one hell of a presentation. Oh, thank you. Can I come to Vancouver as a visitor, job hunting? Well, yeah, you can. You can come to Vancouver and meet companies, but you can't actually work here. So yeah, when getting into contact with employer, they always ask for work permit. Well, that's why you should come to VanHack, because VanHack, all of our jobs sponsor work permit. So it helps you as a job seeker be much more efficient, and we also help you with the whole visa process afterwards. Salary expectation, country, there's a lot of different websites out there about salary. So I would just Google like whatever position you are, however many years of experience you have. So yeah. Any event for junior developers? Yeah, I mean, the event it's for developers in general. Of course, companies usually hire developers from abroad that are more senior. But I would love to have developers from Lowagan join. So please. Danilo, what's the cost of bringing global tech talent Canada, including fees? Great question. So the government fee is $1,000. So it's really not that expensive for like government fees. It's $1,000 per person. So yeah, that's the fee in terms of like government paperwork. So yeah, great question. And they come in on a 2-year closed work permit, so their work permit is connected to you. Thanks to the GF for sharing the salary guide. Cool. Are remote salaries lower? Ooh, good question, Vlad. So remote salaries can be lower. I think that really depends on companies and if they're hiring, what their mindset is. A lot of the companies that we work with, bye Mavash, see you later. A lot of companies we work with, they just give the same salary remotely or in person to kind of keep things simple because it's hard to really negotiate that. But yeah, typically salaries are a little bit lower But again, it depends, right? Because like if you're working in the US, you're going to get a US salary, so your salary is probably going to be higher than developer if the company is here in Canada, because US salaries are higher. So it really depends. And what we try to do is say, hey, pay them a fair market wage in their country, and then pay them a fair market wage in the country you're relocating them to. Happy to help, Rosa. I'm glad you liked it. Talk soon. Is uncertainty around H-1B in US creating opportunities in Canada? I think so, Kurt. I think a lot of companies are opening up Canadian offices, as American companies are opening up Canadian offices. So we're seeing that happening a lot. I mean, go down the list: Grammarly, Tile, Square, and there's so many. Facebook, they all have Canadian offices, and they do that mostly to bring developers to Canada and have them work here. So, and also like sometimes they can bring their developers who are having H-1B trouble up. So, what will the tech market be annoying? Will the tech market after? I don't know what the market will be afterwards. I hope it's the same. No problem, Alini. Nice to see you here. All right, guys, we have 3 minutes left. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. If you did, please tell your friends about VanHack. That's really the biggest thing that I ask. Definitely sign up for the next webinar next Tuesday. We'll try and add more value there, and maybe have some special guests who can give some more information. If you have any tips about remote working that I didn't share, I'm always open to learning and trying to kind of get better ourselves as a company at VanHack. Please share it with us. You can either email me. My email is ilya@vanhack.com. Very simple. I'm just gonna put it in the chat just in case. And yeah. All right. Yeah, my pleasure, Greg. Hopefully it was useful. And yeah, please tell your friends about VanHack. All right, guys. I'm gonna sign off. Thank you so much for coming to the webinar. And if you're a company that wants to hire some great developers, here is a list of all amazing candidates we have. You can easily sign up to VanHack, and someone from our team will be in touch. Thank you very much. Yeah, take care, guys. Stay safe. Wash your hands, all those things. Bye, everyone.